Wave 42, Wave 43, Wave 44. Iran is not stopping and Israel is starting to bleed. 57 people. That is how many were injured in a single Iranian missile strike on the northern Israeli town of Zarzir in the middle of the night, while people slept. A woman in her 30s was pulled from the rubble with shrapnel. Embedded in her back, 3 buildings were struck directly. 1 house was completely destroyed. Nearby homes were damaged by the blast. 7 firefighting teams worked through the darkness to contain the fires. And as the sun rose over Zarzir the next morning, residents stood in front of homes with collapsed roofs and shattered windows, describing the moment the missiles hit. Missiles exploded on the houses. Half of our houses were damaged. I was leaving my uncle's house in a vehicle when the missile hit. I felt the roof of the vehicle fall on me. This is what wave after wave of Iranian ballistic missiles actually looks like when they reach the ground. Not the statistics, not the ERG press releases, not the footage of launches with chants of Allahu Akbar in the background. This is what it looks like in a residential neighborhood in northern Israel at 2:30 in the morning when the air defense systems fail to intercept. And on the night of March 13th, they failed more than once. 6 strikes since midnight. The attack on Zarzir was not an isolated incident. It was the 6th missile strike launched toward Israel since midnight of the same night alone. 6 strikes in a single night from a single country against a single adversary. That is the tempo Iran has now established, not sporadic retaliatory launches, not occasional waves separated by days of quiet, but a relentless, grinding campaign of near-continuous ballistic missile fire designed to keep Israel permanently on the defensive, permanently exhausted, and permanently afraid. The pattern of that night tells the story clearly. In central Israel, a missile carrying what preliminary assessments suggest was a cluster bomb warhead detonated. Over multiple locations simultaneously, cluster munitions work by dispersing dozens of smaller sub-munitions across a wide area. Upon detonation, the scattered impact pattern ensures that a single missile can cause damage across a radius far larger than a conventional warhead. Emergency responders reported damage at 3 separate locations in central Israel. A blaze on the roof of a building in the town of Shar Hanegev, a crater on a highway, and multiple vehicles destroyed in Rishon Lezion. No injuries in that specific strike, but the message of a cluster warhead reaching central Israel is not lost on military analysts. It signals a deliberate Iranian choice to maximize area coverage, to spread the blast footprint of each individual missile, and to make interception even more difficult by creating multiple simultaneous impact zones from a single launched weapon. Meanwhile, in the north, sirens sounded repeatedly throughout the night as the IDF detected multiple launches from Iranian territory. Hezbollah added 2. The pressure launching more than 200 rockets into Israel in coordination with Iran's ballistic missile campaign. The air defense systems were working simultaneously against threats coming from the east and from the north, trying to track and intercept different types of projectiles at different altitudes, speeds, and trajectories. All at once, some got through Zarzir. The night the missiles landed on homes, the most significant single impact of the night occurred in Zarzir, an Arab-Israeli city located approximately 100 kilometers north of Jerusalem, near the border with Lebanon. Shortly before 2:30 in the morning, an Iranian ballistic missile penetrated Israel's layered air defense systems and struck a residential structure directly. The blast damaged multiple surrounding homes and sparked fires that required 7 firefighting teams to contain. The Magen David Adom Ambulance Service, Israel's equivalent of the Red Cross, reported that nearly 60 people were treated for injuries in the aftermath. 57 sustained minor injuries, primarily from glass shards. As windows shattered across a wide radius from the blast, one woman in her 30s was moderately wounded after being struck by shrapnel in her back. She was transported to Rambam Medical Center in Haifa. The other injured were evacuated to Hemic Medical Center in Afula and the Italian hospital in Nazareth. Footage shared by the Associated Press showed the scale of the damage: destroyed homes, crushed vehicles, and a large crater gouged into the ground where the missile impacted. The Zarzir council head described heavy damage at the site and confirmed that 1 house had been completely destroyed. The IDF launched an investigation into the circumstances of the impact standard procedure. When a ballistic missile successfully breaches air defense layers and strikes a populated area, Home Front Command forces, both regular and reserve, were deployed to the scene in coordination with emergency and rescue services. For the residents of Zarzir, the investigation is secondary. Their homes are gone. Their neighborhood looks like a disaster zone. And somewhere in Iran, the launch crews that fired the missile are already preparing the next one. Israel strikes back. Underground factories and ERG headquarters. Israel did not wait for morning to respond. On March 12th, the night before the Zarzir strike, the IDF had already launched extensive strikes across Tehran, Shiraz, and Avaz, targeting multiple Iranian military sites in a coordinated operation. The most strategically significant target struck was a subterranean ballistic missile manufacturing and storage facility in Shiraz. This was not a surface warehouse or an exposed launch site. This was an underground complex built specifically to survive airstrikes, dug into the earth to protect the missiles that Iran has been firing at Israel night after night. The IDF said the facility was being used to manufacture and store the very ballistic missiles that were being launched toward Israeli territory. Destroying it does not just eliminate existing stockpiles, it disrupts future production capacity. It forces Iran to rebuild or relocate manufacturing infrastructure. It introduces delays and disruptions into the supply chain that feeds the launch operations. In a war of attrition measured in waves of missiles, hitting the factory that makes the missiles is among the most strategically impactful operations Israel can conduct. In Avaz, the IDF struck several headquarters belonging to various Iranian regime bodies, including the Irg Ground Forces and Irani's internal security services. The military stated that dozens of Iranian soldiers were present and operating at those headquarters at the time of the strikes. In Tehran itself, explosions were reported. Across the capital and in the neighboring city of Karaj, the latest in a series of Israeli strikes that have now struck the Iranian capital, repeatedly hitting command infrastructure, military compounds, and intelligence facilities across multiple districts of the city. The cumulative effect of Israel's strikes on Iranese command infrastructure is difficult to assess from the outside. Iran continues to launch missiles in waves that suggest undiminished operational capability. But every command center destroyed, every missile factory hit, every senior commander eliminated is a drain on a system that, however resilient, is not unlimited. Waves 42, 43, and 44, Iran's escalation in real time. Even as the damage from the overnight strikes on Zarzir was still being assessed, Iran announced 3 more waves of attacks in rapid succession. The Irg released footage it claims shows the 42nd wave of Operation True Promise for multiple ballistic missiles blasting into the night sky, chants of Allahu Akbar audible in the background. The weapons deployed in this wave included Imad, Qadr, Khyber Shaker, and Fatah missiles. Iranian officials also confirmed that suicide drones were deployed alongside the ballistic missile strikes. Targets named included Tel Aviv and American military bases across the region. The strikes were launched under the slogan Labbaik, Khamenei a rallying cry pledging loyalty to Iran's new supreme leader. Officials framed the operation as a commemoration of what they called the martyrs of the Ramadan War. Within hours, Iran announced the 43rd wave named Operation Yashadid al-Iqab, meaning "O severe in punishment." The operation was dedicated to the memory of senior Iranian military figures, including the late Irg Commander Lieutenant General Hossein Salami. The weapons deployed included heavy Khorramshahr ballistic missiles carrying 2-ton warheads, among the most powerful in Iran's entire arsenal, alongside Qadr missiles with multiple warheads and Imad and Khyber Shaker missiles carrying 1-ton payloads. Targets included the U.S. Navy 5th Fleet Base and other American military facilities, as well as Tel Aviv and the southern Israeli port city of Eilat. And then, before the dust from the 43rd wave had settled, Iran announced the 44th. The 44th wave deployed Khorramshahr, Khyber Shaker, Fatah, and Imad missiles aimed at Kiryat Shmona in northern Israel, Haifa, and U.S.-linked military sites connected to the 5th Fleet. Israeli media reported large explosions heard across the greater Tel Aviv area shortly after air raid sirens sounded across the city as Israeli air defense systems activated against the incoming barrage. 3 waves announced within hours of each other, each named, each dedicated, each carrying its own political and religious symbolism, each involving some of the most powerful ballistic missiles in Iran's inventory, the arithmetic of exhaustion. Here is what 44 waves of missile strikes means in concrete terms. It means that Israel's air defense operators have been working in sustained, high-intensity conditions for weeks, tracking incoming missiles, making interception decisions in seconds, firing interceptors that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars each, replenishing depleted batteries, recalibrating systems, coordinating between multiple layers of defense simultaneously. It means that millions of Israeli civilians have spent weeks rushing to bomb shelters in the middle of the night, sleeping in protected rooms, sending their children to school in the morning not knowing whether sirens will sound before afternoon. The psychological toll of that sustained uncertainty, the permanent low-level terror of not knowing when the next impact will come or whether the air defense will hold, is real, cumulative, and deeply damaging to a society's cohesion. and resilience. It means that Iran's strategy of attrition, launching enough missiles consistently enough to keep Israel permanently defensive, permanently stressed, and permanently spending, is working at least partially, even if the majority of individual missiles are intercepted. And it means that the conflict is not approaching resolution. It is deepening. Wave 42, Wave 43, Wave 44, each one named, each one dedicated to a martyr or a cause or a rallying cry, each one carrying the implicit promise of a 45th, a city in the dark. A region on the Aegean's Arzir, a council head surveys a neighborhood of damaged homes and a crater where a house used to stand. In Tel Aviv, residents hear the explosions before the all-clear sounds and do not know. In those seconds of uncertainty, whether the defense held or whether something got through, in Shiraz, an underground missile factory has been struck by Israeli jets, but no one outside classified briefing rooms knows how many missiles had already left it. In Tehran, explosions light up the sky over the capital for another night in. Aro and the government that ordered those factories built and those missiles launched is already planning the 45th wave. The Middle East has entered a phase that military historians will study for decades as sustained. High-intensity exchange of ballistic missile strikes between a regional power and one of the world's most technologically advanced militaries, with no ceasefire in sight, no negotiations underway, and no clear vision on either side of what the end state actually looks like. Wave after wave, night after night, city after city, and somewhere in the control rooms and launch sites of this war, the countdown to the next wave has already begun.
military said that the injured sailors were receiving medical treatment for non-life-threatening injuries and were said to be in a stable condition.
Arsenal in the Persian Gulf. Military observers say Tehran has developed a layered approach to naval warfare, one that relies on swarms of smaller, cheaper systems rather than traditional.
The USS Gerald R. Ford is taking part in operations against Iran and is currently located in the Red Sea. The U.S. Central Command and Department of War have shared videos showing missiles being launched from the warships towards Iran.
Military analysts say these platforms can serve roles during naval operations and other weapons. Surface or underwater, this strategy may already be affecting global shipping routes. Several intelligence assessments warn that Iran's drone attacks could disrupt maritime traffic through the Strait of Hormuz for months. The waterway, located between Iran and Oman, is one of the most important energy corridors on the planet. residential areas, commercial facilities, and military installations still suffered damage. Iran is widely regarded as one of the region's major producers of military drones. According to estimates from the UK-based Center for Information Resilience, Iran may be capable of producing around 10,000 drones each month. One of the best-known models is the Shahed 136. While Iran's drone production capacity appears substantial, analysts say its missile stockpile may be more limited. Estimates of Iran's ballistic missile inventory vary widely. The Israeli military has suggested the country may possess around 2,500 missiles, while other analysts believe the number could reach as high as 6,000. Missile reserves have reportedly been reduced by earlier transfers to regional allies, including
Iran
Hezbollah in
unleashed
Lebanon
another
and the
massive
Houthi group in
missile
Yemen.
barrage targeting
Previous conflicts
Israel
have
and
also
U.S.
depleted
assets
the
across the
economic
region.
The danger
strikes
in the Strait of
reportedly
Hormuz
lasted
isn't
more than
coming from
3
battleships
hours
or aircraft
and involved
carriers.
some of
It
Iran's
comes
most
from the
powerful
unseen.
weapons.
Drones slicing low over the water, mines
According to
lurking
Iran's
beneath the surface,
Revolutionary
and
Guard
autonomous
Corps,
weapons
the
prowling
latest
silently
operation
through the
marks
shipping
the
lanes,
fifth of attacks
ready to strike
against
without
Israel
warning.
and American forces
In this
in the
narrow
Middle
choke
East.
point that carries a
Iran's
fifth of the
state
world's energy,
media says
even
the
the hint
barrages
of such
included
threats
the
could
launch
grind
of Shah
global trade to
ballistic
a halt
missiles.
for months, sending
Iran
shockwaves through
claims the
markets and
missiles were
nations.
fired in sustained, multi-layered waves targeting key Israeli locations. Among the areas mentioned were Haifa, Tel Aviv, West Jerusalem, and military facilities near Bir Yaqub. Iran also says it struck the Hala Satellite Communications Center south of Tel Aviv for the second time. That facility is believed to play a crucial role in Israel's military communications network. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps also claimed attacks across the region. According to its statement, U.S. bases in Erbil in northern Iraq and the headquarters of the Fifth Fleet in Bahrain's Manama came under heavy fire. Iran's message was blunt and uncompromising. The IRGC declared that the attacks will continue until its strategic goals are achieved. In a striking statement, it said the only outcome it seeks in this conflict is the enemy's complete surrender. But Israel has also launched its own retaliatory strikes deep inside Iran. In a series of posts on social media, the Israeli military said it conducted coordinated attacks on Iranian command centers. Targets reportedly included a special units command center in the city of Tabriz. Another strike hit the Imam Hassan Security Unit military compound. Israeli forces also targeted a command center linked to ballistic missile launches and artillery fire. Additional facilities struck included an intelligence command center in Iran's Marageh province. The Israeli military says it also dismantled key assets belonging to Iran's internal security forces. Operations reportedly targeted headquarters and infrastructure used by the Basij militia and the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. Among the sites hit were intelligence headquarters, internal security facilities, and special forces bases in Ilam province. Israel says the strikes are aimed at weakening the regime's operational capabilities and its systems of control.
headquarters of Hezbollah's financial unit in Beirut.
Iran vowing relentless attacks and Israel striking deeper into Iranian territory, the conflict shows no signs of slowing. Iran's security chief, Ali Larijani, was more pointed still, responding directly to Trump on X. Even those greater than you could not eliminate the Iranian nation, he wrote. Watch out for yourself, lest you be eliminated.
Intelligence and sub-munitions. Military analysts say these platforms can serve roles during naval operations and other weapons. Surface or underwater, this strategy may already be affecting global shipping routes. Several intelligence assessments warn that Iran's drone attacks could disrupt maritime traffic through the Strait of Hormuz for months. The waterway, located between Iran and Oman, is one of the most important energy corridors on the planet. Roughly 20% of the world's crude oil and liquefied natural gas passes through. Since the conflict intensified following U.S. and Israeli strikes on Iran, states aligned with Washington. Air defense systems intercepted most of the incoming attacks. However, reports indicate that several residential areas.
Iran has effectively halted tanker traffic through the Strait of Hormuz, the narrow passage through which roughly a fifth of the world's oil moves daily. The International Maritime Organization confirmed at least 7 sailors had been killed in attacks on merchant vessels near the strait. Escalation in rhetoric on Truth Social, warning that any Iranian action blocking Hormuz oil flows would be met with strikes 20 times harder than anything delivered so far, and separately threatening an attack of incalculable size if Tehran absolutely not looking for a ceasefire. He framed the conflict in broader terms, accusing Israel of perpetuating a cycle of war, negotiation, and ceasefire to consolidate its position, and vowing to break that cycle entirely. His Israeli counterpart, Knesset Speaker Amir Ohana, responded in Persian with 3 words: unconditional surrender was the only proposal on the table.
Iran has launched another missile strike towards central Israel, with initial military assessments suggesting the ballistic missile carried a cluster bomb warhead. The attack triggered air raid sirens across multiple cities in central Israel late in the evening. Viral videos circulating online appeared to show a massive fire following the missile impact. Footage shared on social media captured flames and smoke rising from an area shortly after the strike, though the videos have not been independently verified. According to preliminary assessments based on footage and impact patterns, the missile may have carried a cluster munition warhead. Such warhead disperse multiple smaller sub-munitions over a wide area, increasing the spread of damage. Iran has launched another missile strike towards central Israel, with initial military assessments suggesting the ballistic missile carried a cluster bomb warhead. The attack triggered air raid sirens across multiple cities in central Israel late in the evening. Viral videos circulating online appeared to show a massive fire following the missile impact. Footage shared on social media captured flames and smoke rising from an area shortly after the strike, though the videos have not been independently verified. Iran has launched another missile strike towards central Israel, with initial military assessments suggesting the ballistic missile carried a cluster bomb warhead. The attack triggered air raid sirens across multiple cities in central Israel late in the evening. Viral videos circulating online appeared to show a massive
Zarzir, a city located in northern Israel, sustained massive damage in Iran attack overnight on March 13th. Shortly before 2:30 a.m., Israelis woke up to the roars of Iranian missiles penetrating Israeli air defenses and making a direct impact. 7 firefighting teams were immediately dispatched to the scene after the missile struck a residential structure. The blast damaged nearby homes and sparked a localized fire. The Magen David Adom ambulance service said nearly 60 people suffered injuries in the Iranian onslaught. Israeli media reported that one of the barrages directly hit 3 buildings, causing significant damage. The MDA sustained minor injuries from glass shards, and a woman in her 30s was moderately wounded after being hit by shrapnel in her back. The woman was taken to Rambam Medical Center in Haifa, while the other victims were evacuated to Har Medical Center in Afula and the Italian hospital in Nazareth, as per Ynet report. Footage shared by news agency the Associated Press showed damaged homes and vehicles, as well as in the ground. The Israeli military said it was operating with emergency services at the scene to clear debris. Zarzir council head Atef Grifat said heavy damage was that one of the houses was completely destroyed. The city is located 100 kilometers north of Jerusalem, near the border with Lebanon.
Exploded on the houses. Half of our houses were damaged. Several people were injured, but thank God nothing big happened to people, mainly damage to the houses. I was leaving my uncle's house in a vehicle when the missile hit this house and the one below. I felt the roof of the vehicle fall on me. I was at home. Everything in the house fell apart. Everything was destroyed.
The IDF said it is investigating circumstances of the Iranian ballistic missile impact in the northern town of Zarzir. Said the Home Front Command Forces, both regular and reserve, are operating in coordination with emergency organization assessment in collaboration with emergency and rescue bodies, with the aim of securing the strike occurred during a night of repeated alerts in northern Israel after the IDF detected multiple launches from Iran toward the region. Sirens also sounded following rocket fire from Lebanon. Israel launched wave of extensive strikes on Tehran. This comes as in Tehran and Karaj. The IDF said several Israeli airstrikes in Tehran Shiraz and Ahvaz on March 12th, Iranian military sites, including a subterranean ballistic missile storage site.
Dramatic escalation in the Middle East conflict as Iran unleashes wave after wave of missiles in a massive coordinated strike. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps has released footage it claims shows the 42nd wave of missile launches under its ongoing military campaign known as True Promise 4. The video shows multiple ballistic missiles blasting into the night sky as chants of Allahu Akbar echo in the background. The exact location and date of the footage could not be independently verified. According to the IRGC, the barrage included several types of missiles, including Imad, Qadr, Kibar Shikan, and the advanced Fatah missile. Iranian officials also claim suicide drones were deployed alongside the ballistic missile strikes.